COASTER-net Uncut.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of COASTER-net Uncut. I am, of course, Andy Rabarchuk here this evening from Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Danny Miller from Rochester, New York. We got the Bearded Brothers here, and we've got a special guest with us tonight here. Who's this handsome young man here joining us tonight?
It's no other than Caine Donuts, but you might have heard me from the SHQ. Now I'm here just sitting around doing nothing.
Hey, I remember that show called the SHQ. That used to be pretty good. We used to have like a whole handful of listeners, literally.
Yeah. 3, 2,
3, 1, maybe, not sure. Okay. Anywho,
depended on who was on the show.
This is, of course, COASTER-net Uncut, and obviously we're already in the middle of it here this evening. And if you are new to the show, which many of you might be because you might have seen that awesome tag in the title called Disney, and all of a sudden you're here for the very first time, or if you're just here and you've been here before, but you really can't remember what we do from last week or so, every week we will take you on a coaster journey throughout the industry, giving you our uncut opinion on the theme parks and rides that we have come to love. So we are here this evening, and like we've already heard here, we are going to be talking about Walt Disney World tonight, and that's why we have the Disney expert of Caine Donuts here with us this evening, because we are going to talk about this big firestorm of debate, this issue that has divided the industry, the Maelstrom versus the Frozen debate. So let's get right into this, and let's talk a little bit about what we know. Caine, why don't you start us off with this great Disney debate and tell us a little bit about Maelstrom and what that ride's all about?
Well, Maelstrom, if anyone's been to Epcot, is a boat ride about Viking lore, and it's in the Norway Pavilion. And being that there's this great movie called Frozen, they want to rip Maelstrom out, neuter it completely, and put Frozen characters in there, one way or another. Now, I'm not against Frozen whatsoever. I just think it shouldn't be in Epcot. What do you think, Danny?
Well, you bring up a fair point. I mean, I've seen Frozen. I didn't see it when it first came out. I saw it more recently. I think I saw it over the summer when I was home for a weekend or whatever. It's a good movie. Hey, there goes a moose. I think it was a moose.
The moose outside should have told you that Maelstrom is closed. Come on.
Yeah, right. So, I think as far as my opinion of Frozen goes, you had heard all these great things about it and how it was one of the best Disney movies ever made. It was a very good movie. I enjoyed it. It was a good movie for the demographic you're going after. What, ages 5 to 12-year-old girls, I think. What? You guys are ridiculous. So I think it hits. Yeah, that's all right. So Frozen hits the demographic that I think it's supposed to hit. And Caine, you kind of mentioned it. What is that?
This tomfoolery ridiculousness.
We're a little punchy tonight, if you can't tell.
Well, what's funny,
I'm not even drunk.
What's funny is Caine used to do this constantly on the SHQ, but since it was only a podcast, we just never knew this was what he was doing, playing with little stuffed animals.
No, he's been doing this for years. Yeah.
Now it's fun.
Anyway,
Before it was just funny to myself.
Yeah. So Frozen is a good movie. I enjoyed it. It hits the right demographic that it's supposed to go to. I question whether or not, like you said, it belongs in Epcot, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Epcot doesn't exactly contain a lot of the Disney characters per se. It's not really Disney-fied, I think, is a term that some people have used. So you don't really see a lot of the animated characters there in the rides or the shops or the attractions, and that's fine. So is Frozen would a Frozen attraction be a good fit? Maybe in Norway, yes, because it takes place in that. But as far as putting it in Epcot in a park where you don't necessarily see the characters, I don't know. Maybe you could make the argument that Epcot is geared towards adults maybe a bit more. You do have some thrill attractions with like a Mission Space and Soarin' to a point, and Test Track. You do have some thrill attractions there. So maybe they're looking to add some of the characters into Epcot to maybe kind of diversify the lineup a little bit and maybe draw more younger female children to that park to want to go to Epcot. Because right now, is there really anything that would draw that demographic to Epcot right now?
Well,
I don't know.
They do have some of the characters walking around, like there are photo ops there of like Mickey in like traditional gear of different countries, and I have seen the weirdest thing I've seen there was actually a blonde hair white girl playing Mulan. That was probably the strangest thing I've ever seen at Epcot. Yeah, really, really weird. The one piece of this story that I found fascinating, because this is not a new story, that just recently Disney's announced that Maelstrom's leaving for a Frozen attraction, but pretty much for the whole summer it's been speculated that this was actually going to come down. And the one piece that I found most interesting was actually that the countries actually pay money to Disney to have their pavilions there. So I want to say it was something to like the tune of like Norway's paying Disney $3 million to have it there. So when Norway put up a big stink about Frozen coming in, because they said, well, Frozen's set in a fictional land that kind of looks like Norway, but is actually not Norway, they put up a big stink about it because they're like, Maelstrom represents our country well. It's about our history. Frozen does not. So why are we paying $3 million to Disney to have a representation of our country that's not particularly accurate? And I kind of agree with the country since then, but it seems as if the country's backed off on that. So I'm sure Disney cut a deal with them somewhere in this process to make them quiet down about this, because back in, I want to say, August or July, they were the country of Norway was being pretty vocal about them not wanting a Frozen attraction in Norway because of the money that they were paying for the pavilion. But anywho,
that's interesting.
Yeah, I had not known that before, and we wrote. Dwayne actually wrote a news story on it a few months ago, and that was actually the most interesting part of that whole scenario, was finding out that these countries actually pay money. And it might also lead one to figure out why some countries don't actually have pavilions. Like, people have always said, well, why is there no sub-Saharan African country there? Like, you have like Morocco, which is a North African country, but why don't you have like a South Africa or a Democratic Republic of the Congo or Zimbabwe? Why don't they have a thing? And maybe it comes down to money, that those countries simply don't want to spend the money to put a pavilion into Disney to pay a company that's already making millions and millions of dollars for people going to that place and then having to pay them to put a pavilion there. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But back to the topic of Frozen itself, I'm with you, Danny. I think it's an okay movie. I don't think it's all that good. I wasn't overly impressed by it. If I had to rank it in terms of other Disney musicals, I'd probably rank it a lot lower, where I don't think it even came close to being on the level of like a Lion King or an Aladdin or Little Mermaid or 101 Dalmatians. Like, you have some pretty classic Disney movies out there. Snow White, Cinderella. Frozen is not even in that same class for me. Now, some of you may not know this, but I actually am a high school theater director, and I have done a few Disney musicals in my time. So I'm a little bit of an expert. I do mean very, very little bit of an expert. But if you look at all those other classic Disney movies, especially the ones that were very popular in the 1990s, all of them had one common theme, and that was the composer was Alan Menken. And Alan Menken's pretty much done all the Disney musicals since then, even up to, like, he composed Tangled as well. So if you watch Tangled, even though it's 3D, it sounds a lot like the older, Disney cartoon movies. Now, Frozen went in a completely new direction. That Frozen went with more of a Broadway duo to compose the music, and because of that, they went with more of a Broadway singer to play the part of Elsa. And to me, it didn't work as well for me. That aspect of it sounded too Broadway-y, and I'm not a big Broadway guy. I like Disney musicals, and that's about where my musical love ends. Is I'm not a big fan of musicals in general. And I've seen a few Broadway shows, Wicked, Rent, and none of them, like, they've been okay, like, they've been nice to watch, but nothing that I would go and seek out to go see multiple times or anything. So it's interesting that I'm kind of perplexed and befuddled as to why so many people have really jumped on board this Frozen bandwagon. And there are people that swear by this movie. They absolutely love this movie. They think this is the best thing Disney's done in a while. I just don't get it. I don't get that at all. I understand that it's very well put together. Visually, it's pretty cool. That the scenes with the Ice Palace are amazing. But the main title track of Let It Go and Do You Want to Build a Snowman, those two songs are pretty catchy. But after that, there's a lot of forgettable stuff in there, at least in my opinion, in comparison to like an Aladdin, where it's memorable from top to bottom.
See, the way that I would put it is Frozen is one of the best movies that I've seen that I didn't think I would enjoy. I think just based on what type of movie I knew it was, I would say the same thing about Tangled, too. When I watched Tangled, I really enjoyed it, and I didn't think that I would, just because it's not the kind of movie that would fit, someone in, a male in their early 20s. It's just not the kind of movie that someone like that would enjoy. Same thing, Frozen and Tangled both. They were two movies that I really enjoyed that I didn't think I would. And I think that's how I kind of look at it in that regard. It's different when you're seeing a movie in which it really wasn't a Disney movie, but it was done by Disney, was Miracle, which was the story of the Miracle on Ice in 1980. That's a movie I knew I would enjoy, and it's one of my favorite movies. These, I went in saying, well, okay, I know what this is going to be. I'm going to watch it because I've heard it's really good. And they're really nice movies. There are some iconic classic movies, like you said, The Lion King, just for one example, that I would probably put ahead of it just because, that's something that I grew up with and its longevity at this point. We'll see if Frozen has that type of longevity. And getting into possibly talking about the attraction now and what we might see or why we're going to see an attraction, Disney must be thinking that Frozen has some longevity to it. Because I think we found that Frozen came out in November of 2013. So we're not even a year into when it came out, and we're seeing an attraction for it. You had mentioned that some some attractions go 15 to 20 years, or some movies go 15 to 20 years before they get a signature attraction. Yeah, you had the Snow White Dark Ride, but now they have the Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and how old is Snow White? And the Little Mermaid rides that came in, how long has that movie been around? You're looking at Frozen, not even a year into it, and they're talking about what is sounding like it's going to be a major attraction in a place where, quite honestly, Caine was talking about this before we went on the air, it probably might fit a little bit better in the Magic Kingdom. It seems like it would be a good fit for, like, a fantasy land. So, I don't know, Caine, maybe you want to expand on your thoughts in there a little bit, but it's interesting because this couldn't have been something that's been in their heads for 3 or 4 years. This has to be something that was a very recent decision.
Yeah, exactly. Epcot was built as a World's Fair and for the world of tomorrow. And maybe they weren't getting the demographics that they wanted, aka more little girls in the park. So to attract the little girls into the World Showcase, we're going to bring in Elsa and the Snow Person. See, I don't even know who the hell that guy is. I've never even seen the movie. What's the snowman's name? The funny one.
Olaf. Come on, Caine. You're the Disney guy here. You're here for a reason, Caine, to be the Disney guy.
Hey, I'm a Disney guy. That doesn't mean I see everything Disney.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, his name is Olaf. Now, yeah, so like you look at the recent installations, and they're trying to make up for all this lost time. Now, you can say that a movie like Cars, they were actually pretty quick to capitalize on that out in California, where they did the whole Cars Land.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
So there's an example.
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's an example of Disney reacting well to something being popular, because one of the big criticisms was that when you watch a Disney movie, you see all this new stuff, you see all these characters that you fall in love with, but then you go to a Disney park and you're writing The Wild Adventures of Mr. Toad, or, A Thousand Leagues Under the Sea, or Dumbo, that there was a definite disconnect between what the kids were watching versus what they could experience in the park. And really, you want to try to bridge that as much as you can. And I think Disney has finally come to the conclusion of that when we have a property that's hot, we need to capitalize on it pretty quickly, because then when you do that, the kids have a much deeper experience at that park. They're going to fall in love with that park because they've fallen in love with the movie for whatever reason, and now they get to experience that in real life. And what is Disney doing? They're just following the example that Universal down the block is doing. That's exactly what Universal's doing. Universal is putting out rides left and right that deal with hot properties. Harry Potter is just one thing. Harry Potter is just the surface of that. You have Transformers. You have Shrek. You have Despicable Me. And when these rides become less popular, Universal just gets rid of them, erases them, and throws them away. Like, I would not be surprised if in the next few years that the Shrek 3D movie goes out the door, because Shrek is not in the public spotlight anymore. Put something that's hot there. Put a Despicable Me. That's hot. People are going to pay to come see that. If it stays hot, then you can leave it there. Like, you look at Islands of Adventure then, and you have timeless ideals. Like, as much as people say that Jurassic Park is kind of outdated, we all know that I'm a big Jurassic Park fan. Oh, raptor attack! So Jurassic Park may be outdated, but the fact of the matter is the genre of dinosaurs is timeless. Kids are always going to be interested in dinosaurs, especially young boys. So you can call the dinosaur piece whatever you want. You can call it Jurassic Park. You can call it Dinomania. You can call it, the dinosaur carnival like they have at Disney. Kids like dinosaurs, and that's just going to be something that they're always going to be interested in. But at Disney, you have these parks like Epcot that, you slowly see their numbers either stagnating or not going up. And And you don't see a lot of kids there. Let's be honest, that kids aren't going to be super excited by Soarin'. And we've already seen when little kids go on things like Mission Space, they get sick and they have puke bags. Not a pretty combination there. So I'm actually kind of for this adding Disney characters into Epcot, where even when I was growing up, Epcot was always the most boring of all the parks. It was the park that I never wanted to go to. I don't want to go walk around the World Showcase and look at different food places and stuff. I want to ride rides. Even today, you could make the argument that I want to go ride rides. I don't want to go look at things at Epcot. Obviously there's a demographic for that. But if you're trying to reach that kid market, that demographic of young families, then you need to get something in Epcot that will actually bring people there, which might just be a frozen attraction. Caine, I'm going to have to just – okay, you can go.
Okay, yeah, I just want to, before we keep going on to our next point, I wanted to just follow up with something you said about Universal. You were talking about how Universal's striking while the iron's hot with, especially the Harry Potter, and there's more to come. I believe it was mentioned on an episode of Coaster Radio not all that long ago that E.T. is the last original attraction from when the Studios park opened.
That makes
so
sense
I mean,
to me.
it was Jaws and E.T. and that park opened in the 80s. I mean, we're not really talking about all that long of a time, and you've had a park essentially being replaced. So when you look at it that way, you see Transformers, you see Despicable Me. I'm sure that Shrek is on its way out. It's not one of the more popular rides. Twister is kind of like one of those timeless classics. I like Twister.
Twister's going to be gone before anything else. I guarantee you.
Twister may be one of the next ones to go. Unfortunately, I like Twister.
I think the only time Twister actually gets a crowd is during Halloween Horror Nights when they put a haunted house inside the queue.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the only time it actually sees people walking through the gate. Twister's like the only one. Now keep in mind, like things like they repurposed a lot. So the Simpsons ride, I believe, was originally Back to the Future.
That was Back to the Future. Yep.
So they've gotten rid of their Terminator ride. I was kind of surprised when they got rid of Jaws because that was like the iconic Universal Studios ride.
The thing with Jaws is that it was such a maintenance nightmare, and the cost because the problem is you have to pay the skippers spiel. So because the skippers are spieling, you have to pay them extra. Then you have all the upkeep of the special effects. Otherwise, the ride's not worth it. Then you have all the fire and the mechanics of the sharks and everything. There's pictures online of the Jaws ride when it's dry, and those pictures are like really a sight to see in the spots where there's stuff going on, because it's actually really impressive to see all the crap. Especially inside the building, it's impressive to see all that crap in there. So, I mean, it would make sense if Disney's going to do a big Frozen thing, because we talked about how when Harry Potter, the first round of Harry Potter came out in Islands of Adventure, how Disney's response to that was New Fantasyland. And the discussion was between the Forbidden Journey ride and the Little Mermaid ride, which one of those is better? And that's probably going to determine who is the winner in that battle. And Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, a spectacular attraction, one of the best rides in the world, immersive, a great story, excellent theming, and it's something that people can wrap their heads around even if they're not full-blown Harry Potter fans. Actually, when we went down there for the very first time, my sister didn't know much about Harry Potter, didn't care about Harry Potter, rode that ride. She is an absolute Harry Potter freak now because of that ride. Not a lot of people do that at Disney. People who go to Disney are usually Disney freaks beforehand. And I know that probably doesn't happen with a ton of people. But then you go over to Fantasyland, and I've ridden the Little Mermaid ride in California, which is just kind of set inside of a nice-looking building. It's not, the building itself isn't themed like it is in Florida, from what I understand. It's a nice ride. It's not an E-ticket ride. I would probably say a D ticket, maybe a D-plus ticket for the Disney folks. They'll understand that terminology. It's essentially grading how good of an attraction is. Your major attractions are E-tickets. And then you have like C and D tickets and, all the way down. So the Little Mermaid ride was essentially you're riding through the story. You're riding through the movie, and it almost felt a little bit rushed, as if you kind of like skipped to the end. You have some great animatronics. The Ariel animatronic, the Sebastian the crab, the eyes on Sebastian they're really expressive, and it's really cool, and it looks like Ariel's hair is bouncing under the water. And then, they're in the boat. Ariel and Prince Eric are in the boat, and then the Ursula animatronic. It's a really impressive ride. You wish it were a bit longer because it felt a little rushed, and it's not a thrill attraction. So unless you're in that younger demographic, you're going to pick the Harry Potter ride. So now with Harry Potter Round 2 and Diagon Alley coming through here and more stuff on the way for Universal, Disney knows that they need to come up with something else, and I don't know that Avatar Land is going to be it. And Avatar Land is still probably a year or two away. I mean, I don't know that that's even going to be ready for 2015, even if it's towards the end. It's not going to be in for at least another year. So, and this Frozen attraction probably won't be either, but Frozen is hot right now. Even though it's new, it is hot, and if they have sequels or continuations of at least the characters themselves, I would think that they would want to jump on that right now, because who knows what Harry Potter is going to be in 20 years. It may die out, and they may just have to redo it as something generic, and you could do that. What I'm struggling with is what exactly would this Frozen attraction be? And I think the reason I struggle with that is when you're talking about the Harry Potter stuff, and especially with Gringotts, and as soon as everyone was talking about, they might be doing this Diagon Alley thing, they're going to put it at the other park, the Hogwarts Express is going to take you back and forth, and you're going to have the Gringotts Bank attraction, and it's going to be the Gringotts Bank roller coaster. And everybody knew that. And all the Harry Potter fans knew that. I'm curious to see what some of the Disney folks might be thinking this could be, because Frozen is aimed at that younger demographic. It's not really an action movie per se. I don't know what sequence from the movie you would have to be that. Maybe if they came up with their own storyline that's still related to the characters and related to the movie. I know at least the Gringotts attraction is set as if it's occurring just off the screen. Like in the queue line, I believe there's a reference to one of the Weasleys who's there, and someone says, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here," because he's not in that scene. Whoever it is isn't in that scene in the movie. It's a little wink, wink, nod, nod to, okay, that's not how it actually happened. But you're supposed to be right off screen. So maybe if they did something like that, they could be a bit more creative with it. But if they're going to stick to the actual story of the movie, I'm kind of struggling to see what they would do with it. I'm interested to see what they can come up with.
Well, and that's almost, I think, one of the biggest failings of the Frozen movie is that it doesn't have that iconic stuff going on in it. That you have a few iconic things. You have, obviously, the Ice Palace. The Ice Palace was amazing in that movie. I could definitely see something being done in there. You have the giant snowman that attacks in the Ice Palace. That could be the action part of the ride. But outside of that, you have like a sleigh ride. You have a storm at the end. There's not a lot going on in there, and it's kind of like, well, what do you do with this ride? Because I almost want to say that you can't go back to the old Disney formula that they use with things like Little Nemo and and Little Mermaid, or not, Little Nemo. What is that? It's Finding Nemo, and Little Mermaid, and all of these dark rides that basically just take, like you said, they take you through the story. This ride, I think, needs to be a home run for Disney. This is a hot property. This is something that kids are going to want to go to, that you are talking about, not just having people that are already going to Disney on a family vacation. You're talking about an attraction that could actually get you more people who say, wow, I can't miss a Frozen ride, and I want to go right away to go see this. So you might have new people specifically signing up to go experience this attraction. It needs to hit a home run. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know, you said it has to fit the demographic. Do you put roller coaster elements in there? Do you not? Do you keep it on a boat? I don't think the boat actually fits the story, but it would take a lot less work to keep it on the boat. Or, you have SeaWorld opened up the, Antarctica Empire of the Penguin ride. And like we said before.
Yeah, the dark ride.
It really didn't hit a home run. It really wasn't received very well. I think most people would consider the whole thing a flop. But yeah. the cool thing about it was the trackless car. That it was a new piece of technology. It kind of allowed people to experience the ride in different ways each time they rode it. Maybe something like that would work in Frozen a lot better, where you could take a path through the Ice Palace, or take a path through the mountains, or take a path through the little rock troll people. I don't know, because like you said, this story just doesn't lend itself well to figuring out what exactly a ride would be made out of it. Like, where's this ride going to come from? Maybe I don't even know, to be honest. I think Olaf has to be a big part of it, because Olaf was really a huge part of that movie, and I don't think you're going to get a person like Kristen Bell to part. Well, you might. It's Disney, so you might be able to bring back the cast.
Well, the thing is, and maybe Caine can maybe weigh in on this a little bit too. The thing with Olaf is, I kind of viewed Olaf as almost like the Minions from the first Despicable Me movie. They weren't as big a part of it as, if you didn't see the movie right away, like, he was one of the, Olaf is one of the iconic characters that even if you haven't seen Frozen, you know he's from Frozen, and you don't see him until halfway through the movie, as an actual character, really. So, and then, like, the second Despicable Me movie is all about the Minions. So I would capitalize on the Olaf character because it was such a beloved character. And like you said, and maybe this will kind of transition our discussion a little bit, and we can get into some of the comments from the question we asked too. But I don't know that it can really be a thrill attraction, because that's not the type of people who are into the movie. I think you can't make, they made a Snow White roller coaster, but it's a family attraction. You can't make a high thrill roller coaster after The Little Mermaid, and you can't make a high thrill roller coaster after Frozen. It's not the people who are going to be interested in it. I mean, Caine, what are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, after hearing about this, I think they could put anything in Frozen. Let's not forget that people wait 2 to 3 hours to get pictures taken of just people dressed up as the princess. And people are getting a fast pass just for this. So I think they had an idea, which they probably already do, and get it in by summer of 2015. They'll just keep rolling in the dough. Think about it. Yeah, 2 hours just to meet someone who's not even that real character.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't really think they need to.
I think one of your points is really important. They're going to have to do this pretty quickly. I've heard rumblings of a Frozen 2, although Disney sequels are not usually that good, or especially ones that are based on old, fairy tales and stuff. Usually you
Except for Toy Story.
Well, but that wasn't based on a fairy tale. That was a completely Disney,
that was their own story.
That was their own, just like Cars was their own story. This is
right.
loosely based on the story of the Ice Princess, I think it's called, or it's a Hans Christian Andersen story that if you I've watched the special features.
Snow Queen.
The Snow Queen, that's it. That it was actually a short story that wasn't even meant to be like a long movie or anything. Like a lot of aspects of Frozen are already completely fabricated. So of all the Disney movies, it would not be out of the question that they could just continue fabricating ideas to create a Frozen 2. But they're going to have to do it quickly. They have to make this ride in the next year or so. To really hammer home and capitalize on this money that's out there. Why don't we get into our discussion of the thrill rides at this point to see what other people have said. Now, the basic idea is we asked the people of the internets if
the blogosphere, the interwebs.
If they preferred if they think Disney should enter into the high thrill market, or if they should stick with the family stuff that they currently use. So, Danny, why don't you start with some of the comments that we saw?
Yeah, we had a lot of people, weigh in on this, both on the COASTER-net forums and on the Facebook page, the Coaster Consortium, which is kind of like the general coaster enthusiast page that we like to dig into. A lot of COASTER-net people on there. My Aunt Sue wrote in the forums. She thinks that they both have their place in the industry. Talking about Disney and the Disney model with the high theme, low thrill, and then more of your Universal Busch Gardens type of model where you also have high thrill and high theme, and then Six Flags Cedar Fair, you have high thrill, low theme. They each have their place, she says. It really depends on the demographic that they're meant to target. She doesn't think that Disney should really get involved with high thrills too much, because then you're turning off a big portion of who the audience is at the Disney parks. Disney is more about immersive experiences. In the past, they've combined immersive experiences with coasters, but it's not what they're about. Herself, she prefers the high thrill parks, or a combination park like Universal, where you still get high thrill, but you get some high themes as well. We're kind of working on a November trip down to Florida. We're close to getting some finalizations going there, and we're kind of debating whether or not we want to go to Disney. We've been to Florida the last 4 years now, and we did Disney the second year and then again last year, so every other year. So this year we wouldn't do Disney. And we're leaning that way, and actually leaning towards spending a second day at Universal because of the new stuff there, Transformers, the new Harry Potter stuff. Universal, the two parks, if it's a busy day, is already more than a one-day experience. So she's going that route, and we had some other people on the Coaster Consortium here. Well, Stephen Lynn, our buddy Stephen.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Stephen Lynn said he says he loves the Disney low thrill, high themed attractions. And then he actually makes one of the most asinine comments I've ever read.
Oh, in my life. You want to call him out on this?
Yeah.
That's why you wanted to read his.
Oh yes. He makes the claim that he would rather ride the Haunted Mansion multiple times over riding Maverick at Cedar Point multiple times.
Oh! Okay. Right to Andy's heart.
Maverick is
right to Andy's heart.
One of the best steel roller coasters in the world. And you're going to sit here and tell me that you want to ride the Haunted Mansion more times? Are you out of your mind? Stephen Lynn, get a hold of yourself. You're crazy. You are insane.
And he's an Ohio guy. He's a Cedar Point guy. That surprises me coming from him. Right to Andy's heart. That hurt Andy here. That bothered him.
Well, what's funny is that, he talks about, the high thrills. And then another person on the Coaster Consortium, Josh Moore, he actually points out that Disney has dabbled in the high thrills, that people like to kind of just glaze over all the times that they've dabbled there. And they've dabbled there with the Indiana Jones roller coaster, with the Raging Spirits at Tokyo Disney Sea. But also, if you think of Hollywood Studios has two very major high thrill attractions, one in the Rock and Roller Coaster and then two in the Tower of Terror. And both of those rides are no slouches. I think most people would rank the Tower of Terror towards the very top of their drop tower rides. And a lot of people have a high regard for the Rock and Roller Coaster as well, which kind of leads us into the next phase of our discussion, with maybe Hollywood Studios becomes this high thrill park that people have always been hinting at. That if you followed any Disney blogs, there's always been a strong rumor that Disney would eventually create what they called a villains park. And the villains park would offer all the high thrill rides. It would have roller coasters and drop towers and extreme rides. Obviously, that's never happened. Right. Obviously, Disney's pretty much denied it at every turn. But if you see what's happening at Hollywood Studios, what's happening there is very interesting, because you already have these two very high thrill rides there. Now you may argue that might be one of the reasons why that park is the least attended of all the Disney parks, that Hollywood Studios is usually the least attended. It's also the smallest park. So you could point to a number of reasons of why it's the least attended. But some people would say it's because they have these high thrill rides. It doesn't speak to the demographic of people going to Disney, that they're too intense, they're too scary, and so people just stay away. But what's happening over there now with the acquisition of Star Wars is that you have the very real possibility that Hollywood Studios, if they do a whole Star Wars land there, that they could become this high thrill park that people have been asking for. That you go back to the From Dreams to Screams documentary on Cheetah Hunt down at Busch Gardens, Tampa, and the designers down there basically said that Cheetah Hunt was designed after a speeder bike race. So I wouldn't be surprised. I can only begin to scratch the surface of my mind of all the different rides you could create out of the Star Wars universe. You could have endless rides there. And it seems that now with the closing of the Backlot tour that we saw this week, that we saw last week, that now they're clearing out space for this unknown reason. And there's a lot of people saying that this is going to turn into like the major Star Wars park. And I think you're just going to expand on that high thrill ride concept of adding in more and more Star Wars rides that really knock the socks off of people. Maybe not. I'm not saying they're going to build the next Millennium Force there, but they're going to build roller coasters, dark rides, flight simulators. Just think about it. Speeder bike races, X-Wing flight stuff. Just the possibilities are completely endless there of what you could do. And I'm really excited by that. But once again, is that going to eventually affect the attendance? Star Wars obviously is going to bring in the people. Danny, you had a statement about Star Wars and what's going to happen.
Well, I guess the whole discussion was if Disney wanted to come up with something that was Potter killing, I guess is the term that some people have used, it would have been Star Wars. Star Wars has the same type of staying power. It has the same sort of mass appeal, probably has better staying power, bigger staying power, bigger mass appeal than even something like Harry Potter. Because how old is Star Wars?
Late 70s.
Yeah, so I mean, Star Wars is much, much older than Harry Potter, and it's still big. You still have people raving for Star Wars. You have the nerd conventions, like the, roller coasters, that's a nerd thing. Star Wars, that's a nerd thing too. And it's got the same kind of staying power that, bigger probably than Harry. Do you think in 30 years from now, Harry Potter will be as big as Star Wars is now? I mean, Star Wars is kind of being discovered by a new generation right now, is it not?
Well, and that's the thing with Star Wars going over to Disney is I think George Lucas kind of knew what had to be done, and for Star Wars to stay relevant, it has to be reintroduced, like you said, to the new generation. And they're putting out new movies, they're putting out new TV shows. Like Disney's planning on doing a ton of Star Wars movies. Even almost to the point of maybe one a year is what I'm hearing, that Star Wars will become like their new Marvel, where if you imagine like how every superhero has their own movie, well, they're doing all these spin-offs with all these Star Wars characters now. So do not be surprised if Star Wars becomes as ubiquitous as some of these other things have been in Hollywood with, Marvel characters and DC trying to get on the act. For the question of will Harry Potter be that big in 30 years, I don't know because J.K. Rowling has said that she's not making any new movies or writing any new books, and without new media, things tend to disappear pretty quickly. So yeah, the theme park is pretty cool, and the rides are cool, and the theming is amazing, but at the end of the day, is that enough to sustain those characters? But on the flip side, you could also say it has been enough to sustain the Disney characters. When's the last time you saw a Mickey Mouse movie? Or a Mickey Mouse TV show?
Yeah, it's true.
And yet those characters are still fresh in the people's minds. So to say that, you have to have a new TV show, you have to have movies to keep these characters relevant, for how many years was Goofy relevant, or Pluto, or Mickey Mouse, or Donald Duck? That these are all characters that don't really have a whole bunch of new media, especially not in Hollywood, but yet they're still very relevant in the people's minds. Because I think in part, maybe in big part, due to the theme parks, that the theme parks have kept them successful. And since Universal's not going anywhere, maybe Universal will do the same for Harry Potter that Disney did for Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes of it. And quickly, we should say there's probably some people wondering, Caine's little girl started crying in the background, so that's why he disappeared on us magically. He messaged us private in our little 3-person chat room that he had to sign off, so he quietly left us. So we want to thank Caine for coming on and talking with us. He always has some good stuff on at Disney, so hopefully we'll have him on again. But we asked a question about this whole Disney thing, and to the people, to the listeners, and in the Coaster Consortium and on COASTER-net, about what they thought, where Disney's place is, if they think that maybe Disney should try some more high thrill attractions. And I think we had a lot of people write in, and I think the general consensus is that Disney has its place in the industry. Disney is always going to be number one, at least for the foreseeable future in terms of attendance and revenue. They're always going to be number one. You had some good numbers about how Universal, even with its massive growth in the last 5 years or so, they're barely scratching at the lowest Disney park in the United States. So that really tells you something about just how far ahead Disney is. But I think most people are on the same page that if you're willing to sacrifice the thrills for an immersive family experience, Disney is a good way to go. But if you're more in the camp that prefers the high thrill attractions, like myself or yourself or my Aunt Sue, or Stephen Lynn's a big Disney fan. He wrote in with us, but for the most people, I think, watching us and listening to us here prefer the high thrills and would prefer a Universal or a Busch Gardens or even a SeaWorld maybe over a Disney. That being said, they still enjoy Disney because they know what it is. So it comes down to personal preference and also knowing what you're getting into when you go to those parks. So I think that's kind of the best way to look at it, and I think most people would come down in that camp where Disney is great, but if it's high thrill that you're looking for, it's not quite for you. And most people, I think, are saying they prefer that Disney kind of stay out of that because that's not really their game. It's nice to have an Expedition Everest. It's nice to have a Space Mountain. It's nice to have a rock and roller coaster, a Tower of Terror, because they're high thrill, but they're still heavily themed. But I don't think anyone wants to see Disney do something like a wildfire at Silver Dollar City, and I only say that because my other laptop had that one coming up where, okay, the station and the queue is themed, but once you're on the ride, it's just a roller coaster. I don't think anyone thinks Disney's going to go that route anytime soon.
As a final point here, I wanted to bring up that Ryan Shrout, one of our good friends at COASTER-net, who writes for us every now and then, he's been a writer in the past. He's mainly, keeping control of the forums over there for the most part. But he just wrote a blog about the Frozen or the Maelstrom to Frozen transition. And he basically makes the point in the blog that what makes him sad most is maybe not so much the loss of Frozen, but the loss, first of all, of one of the original, Epcot attractions. That he says if you look at the attractions that have been taken out over the last few years across the whole Magic Kingdom and across Epcot and all the other places, that Disney is losing a lot of their original attractions. And also he points out that some of the most loved attractions, too, are being taken out. And, I think you could argue over what is most loved. But when you look at Mr. Toad's Wild Ride and you look at the Mexico ride that was a boat ride that turned into Donald Duck and the Three Cabrillos, or you look at even at Magic Kingdom, one of my favorite attractions there, which I thought was amazing and totally un-Disney-like, was the extraterrestrial alien encounter that was basically like a almost like the precursor to like a 4D theater that had all of these, really scary aspects that would drive people crazy, and they turned it into like a Stitch ride or a Stitch attraction.
And nobody likes that Stitch ride, really. Most 95, probably more than 95% of people. I know Mike over at Coaster Radio is a big Disney guy, and he's in the same camp as most Disney people where it's just Stitch, it's cute, it's better for kids, but the extraterrestrial alien encounter was just amazing. I remember riding that as a kid and thought fantastic. It was so cool.
So Ryan basically makes the point of it makes him sad that you are putting this replacement in Frozen, and to put more fire onto that. He's also upset that they're doing it at Epcot and they're doing it in the World Showcase. That this was initially made to be showing off these different countries, these different cultures, and now you have this Frozen ride going in there that's completely different. And his main point is that each park has its own purpose, that you have, Epcot as being the World Showcase to show off different culture and show off like different aspects of the world. You have what was originally MGM, which is now Hollywood Studios. That's purpose is to show off different movies that you make. And then you have the Magic Kingdom to put all the kiddie stuff in, all the princesses and cartoons and all of this. And his point is basically the Frozen ride probably should have gone in the Magic Kingdom, if anywhere, as opposed to going into Epcot. But
it seems like it would be a better fit over there.
It would definitely be a better fit, but I think it comes down to money. That Disney realizes that they need maybe some more people going into Epcot and maybe having those people stay there a little bit longer, beefing up the entire portfolio. Maybe it's because of the universal heat that they're under, that they don't want these smaller parks to fall off and to be overtaken by Harry Potter. And on their own, those parks might not be able to maintain those numbers that they traditionally have. And maybe they need something like Frozen to be able to go in there to beef up the numbers, because for sure, there's going to be a lot of kids at Epcot when that ride opens, and probably for the foreseeable future. So,
Well, and Epcot has always been the park that was kind of the more adult park, I guess, if there was one. That's where the Food and Wine Festival is, with the different countries, and it really doesn't have a lot of the characters like we talked about earlier. So I think I think it'll be interesting to see where this goes, and maybe this will be my last thought here, is whatever they decide to do with Frozen to replace Maelstrom now that it's closed and now that it's gone, I would hope that it's as good as we're hoping it is, obviously. I don't think anyone in the industry really hopes that anything is a dud, because if it is, that's not good for the park, and it's really not good for competition. We've seen with Harry Potter how competitive Central Florida has gotten, even down to Tampa, Busch Gardens. So I would hope that whatever replaces Maelstrom with this Frozen attraction is successful and does make a big splash, because it's going to throw the ball back into the court of Busch Gardens and SeaWorld and Universal, and it's only going to make competition better down there for those parks. So I hope we come away with having an attraction that keeps up that sense of competition and keeps making the parks wanting to not only outdo their competitors, but also wanting to consistently outdo themselves and to top themselves on a consistent basis. So I guess that's what the big takeaway is here from my point of view.
So I think at this point, I think we should probably wrap this nice little discussion up. I think we've covered about everything that we can cover in the time frame that we're allotted. I really don't have any final thoughts on this. I think pretty much all the final thoughts I've had have been spoken already on this topic.
Yeah, we've set our due diligence, I think, on this. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be fun to keep an eye on and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd like to once again thank Caine Donis for coming on to the show and gracing us with his opinion about Disney and such. So for him from Portage, and for me, Andy Rabarchek from Chicago.
And Danny Miller, Rochester, New York.
And as always, right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next week.